34 years ago, something happened that just about caused a revolution. People went into a complete uproar over all this great land. If social media existed at that time, it would probably have exploded, because no one saw this great event coming. And when it did, people simply went ballistic. And for many, it was outrageous. It was ridiculous. It was stupid. It was a serious lapse of judgment, to say the scene. So if this were something in religion, it would have been called a sacrilege. So what was it that happened 34 years ago? What made men and women across this country so angry and so upset? What caused such outrage? New Coke. You laugh. Some of you remember that, don't you? The Coca-Cola Company tried to improve their product by taking the bold step of tinkering with the formula of the most famous soft drink in the world. And almost no one was happy about it. Some people probably genuinely didn't like this new taste as much. Some people may have objected on principle, whatever that principle might be, I don't know. And others just wanted to join in on the feeding frenzy of complaining. And before you knew it, the original Coke was back on the shelves and is still there today. And what's it called? Classic Coke. That's where it is. Now, this might seem to be a very trivial thing. And the truth is, it is, okay? But it does point out something very true about the human experience. And that is this, that many of us do not like change, right? Even little changes can be hard. So, you're used to watching this series on TV for years and years and years, and all of a sudden, they bring in a new character, or they write off your favorite character. I'm going to stop watching. That show's no good anymore, okay? Or the person you're dating suddenly decides they're going to get a new do, or a new style, or a new look. And you try to figure out how to tell them to go back to the old style because you really don't like it without getting yourself in trouble, of course. Or your favorite restaurant tweaks its menu, or your favorite sports team changes its uniform, or something that was once free now requires a nominal fee. All of these sort of things are unsettling, they're upsetting, and even sometimes more than a little disappointing. Well, and then there's big changes too, and I don't even have to go into too many examples of them because nearly all of us have had to face some sorts of uncertainty in life, because life consists of ups and downs, joys and sorrows, things that go planned and things that just seem to come out of nowhere. Life is filled with good health, bad health, of births, of deaths, of marriages, divorces. Life is full of change, sometimes on a daily basis. All that you see here, the day will come when there will not be left a stone upon another stone that will not be thrown down. Jesus said these words in today's gospel passage from Luke. People were gazing up at the magnificence of the temple in Jerusalem. And in one sense, it was a foreshadowing of that second destruction of the temple, which would take place less than 40 years later. But in a very real sense, Jesus could have been talking about anything on earth, any city or town, any building, you name it. Jesus knew that none of these things were eternal. None would last. All would someday pass away. Every single tree, every single rock, every single living thing. Jesus knew what he was talking about. You see, change is about the only constant thing that we can count on concerning our day-to-day lives. Almost nothing stays the same, except God. God and God's love, and God's mercy, and God's providence, and God's saving power. All else are fleeting. All else are subject to all kinds of forces, some natural, some random, some of the results of choices that we make or others make. But God is not that way at all. God is eternal. God's goodness and compassion and care and concern and fidelity, that never wavers. That never changes. The truth is, God is the only reality that we can have complete and utter trust and confidence in. God is God. And therefore, God simply is. And nothing but better news, the very best news. Jesus says some pretty frightening things in today's gospel. He describes some really scary consequences for following him, some pretty rough outcomes for those who follow where he leads. And it's a pretty sobering picture that he paints. And while most of us would say, I hope that none of that happens to me, our personal experience teaches us that similar things happen to us all the time. Our crosses may be different from those of the early disciples, but our crosses are heavy nonetheless. Broken relationships, lost jobs, addictions, illness, death. These things hurt. They really hurt. They really disappoint. They really shake us to our core. And we usually can't do a thing about them. Of course, when things are going well, we want nothing to change, but that simply doesn't happen very often. Life happens instead. And that means change, whether for the better or for the worse. And that's just life. But one thing doesn't change: our loving God. God will never abandon us. God will never stop loving us. God will never stop embracing us and drying our tears. So let's stay close to God and allow God to do just that. Let God remain our rock-solid foundation amidst our lives of change and change and more change. All things will pass away, but God's love won't. And that means we won't either. So let's embrace God fully in this life and into eternity.